When a seminarian is sent to Rome to finish out his studies and formation for the priesthood, it's rather typical that then, studying in a Roman university, he continue in further studies for an advanced degree, a postgraduate degree, in a specific area of study in order to assist, and we're assigned by the bishop, as he says, well, we need somebody who is an expert in this area or that area, and so you continue your studies in that way. And so 10 years ago, on this day, I received a call from the bishop that said, and I was cooking dinner for my family. They were all out doing something, I can't remember. But I said, oh, it's the bishop, I better pick up. So I picked up, of course. And he said, we've been giving some thought to your theological studies. Would you like to be in Rome for your theological studies? And I think at that point the shrimp burned. But it was on this feast day, St. Raymond of Penyafort, and I had been, already been praying my office that day, and I knew that, after those 3 years of theology studies, and you begin in that fourth year some advanced degree, and I went, Penyafort was a canon lawyer. Does this point to these studies? Because nobody likes canon lawyers. I say that after living with one for a few years, but the point being, in a small history of canon law in the church, is that before 1917, there wasn't one book that you could look to. You couldn't just open up what we call the Code of Canon Law and say, oh, this is what the church says about this, or about this, or about this, because they were these scattered decrees. And to be a canon lawyer, you had to bring all these decrees together. And so one of the biggest historical kind of feats of the church history in terms of canon law was the decree of Gratianus, where he took everything that he could find and put it in one, huge tome that could then be copied and sent out, right? All the decrees about sacraments and what can be done here and what can be done there and how sponsors are to present themselves and all these different things. And I think that sometimes our presentation of church law can be off-putting because people will say, well, isn't that just legalism? Isn't that just, you're putting obstacles in my way? For example, when someone wants to be a sponsor or a godparent, and we say, well, this is what the church says you have to, all the requirements you have to meet, and we find some obstacle to that. And they say, who are you to say? And it's like, it's not really me. It's the church saying, if you want to be a shining example of faith, you have to hit all of these external requirements in order to present yourself as one suitable to this office of sponsor. Right? And that's a very important word in the church, office. An official act, an official role that comes with it rights, duties, and responsibilities. The church has a law to protect and to guide. The church never sets out arbitrary laws, arbitrary policies. And so when it comes to these offices, for example, a pastor or a sponsor, or even when someone becomes baptized, they take on the office of the common priesthood, and with that comes rights, duties, and responsibilities. And you're agreeing to live by those things, right? Some of those responsibilities of marrying according to the laws of the church, of attending Mass on Sundays and holy days of obligation, except when there's an epidemic, right? Of being sure that there's a support for the church, that there's a support for the missionary activity, all of these different precepts, laws of the church, being sure that people are prepared properly for the sacraments, but then rights that come along with that as well, spelled out right there in the Code of Canon Law, that they have free recourse to their pastors, free recourse to their bishops. They have a right to spiritual care when they ask at an opportune time and with their soul disposed. And so some of those obligations of a pastor are put there not to impede my life, but to be sure that your rights are respected, that you are able to receive the care of the church and to have the pastoral service of the church, to live lives of holiness. And so one of the first things that I said when it came to parish staff here, and we did a day of recollection when I was appointed, is I said, we have certain policies, but I don't want these to be an obstacle. There are times in which we have to say, okay, we might have policies, but there's always an exception. Why do I say that? Because one of the beautiful things about the Code of Canon Law is that we look at all of these laws, and in the last one, the last canon of the church, is one of the shortest, but one of the most profound. It says, Lex supremo ecclesiae salus animarum. The supreme law of the church is the salvation of souls. The supreme law of the church is the salvation of souls. Everything put forth before that about the sacraments, about marriage, about annulments, about all of these different things, about how a parish is structured, how a diocese is structured, all of that, when followed carefully and kept faithfully, leads to the last thing. All of this law is so that souls may be saved. Sometimes we set laws in our homes, in our households, in our families, right? For our own selves when it comes to times of fasting and penance. Be sure it's always with a purpose, that it's never for some human gain. Always be sure it's ordered towards the salvation of your own soul, the souls of your family members, those in your household. We always have to set up those rules knowing they can't be arbitrary. They can't be just to set discipline, but it always has to funnel our own selves and those who we come in contact with towards the gate of heaven. So we set ourselves faithfully to the law of the church as good Catholics, looking to do those things the church says are for the benefit of our salvation, to be sure that we're walking in the way of righteousness, truth, right, and justice, but then also being sure that the order that we set in our own life is truly ordered to eternal life.